This massive division. Huge division. And if in 100 years' time they're watching this and they think, where give me 5 minutes that explains this period in time. Look at the reaction to Hamas from the left. So essentially, they've been unable to isolate the situation in their mind. They've been unable to say this is let's look at this incident on its own merit. Okay, let's forget the context for now, because if you do, as soon as you start adding whataboutery, you'll say oh, there's 40 babies being murdered, and then someone will go, what about? And all of a sudden nobody's talking about the fact that 40 babies have been murdered. That's okay, because what about this? No, you have to look at it in isolation, and you have to be able to call it out. It's terrorism. It is 100% terrorism. The BBC are cowards for calling them militants. Militants lead unions. Militants don't parachute in and kill babies. So we shouldn't be able... It doesn't matter what side of politics you're on. You shouldn't disagree with that. In fact, if you're intelligent in any way, you just go, yeah, that's not right. I mean, I agree with the plight of the Palestinian people, but now I can take that argument because I don't believe that everybody in Palestine is a Hamas supporter in the same way that everybody in the UK is a Conservative supporter. Just because there's democracy and they've been voted in, it doesn't mean that everybody can be tarred with that brush. But for some, honestly, I cannot logically put it together. There are people on the left... Queers for Palestine. That's all I'm going to say. I mean, Queers for Palestine, do they understand? Do they understand what they're asking for? Do they understand that if they stood with that flag in Palestine, then they wouldn't be stood there very long? And if they can't see that, and they can't see what the problem is, then they're never going to learn. And I think we just end up with this perpetual motion of negativeness that we're seeing right now.
The queers can be for Palestine, but Palestine is not for the queers. That's the issue.
Agreed.
Yeah, so much there. I mean, it's what I think is it's a dual threat of on this issue of the intellectuals who've paved the way for the horrors we're seeing now. We see the Ivy League universities in America are kind of having demonstrations on campus that are kind of bordering on pro-Hamas kind of vibes, and we saw people like Rivka Brown at Navarra Media, these intellectuals saying it was a day of celebration when we saw the horrors. And people, by the way, will say, oh, the babies thing is not proven or something. But it's like, at this point, we're arguing about levels of rape and murder. And it's all, to me, it's like, can we agree they're horrific? Hamas are horrific either way. So, but we've got these people, these intellectuals with this decolonization nonsense. And there's a great episode we've done with Doug Stokes, who wrote the book against decolonization. So I urge everyone to listen to that. But they've paved the way intellectually. Then you have the people on the ground who are just people shouting "Gas the Jews" at a I don't know what you call it. You can't even call it a protest, really, some kind of vicious rally. And those two together, when we need to fight the ideas, which we've been doing, and in our humble way, we try and do it on GB News. And then the other people, it's just deport, really, isn't it? Just get them out, because there's nothing else you can do. They're not going to change their minds now. You're not going to win them over with ideas because they're not in that realm. They're operating from ideology and emotion and you know, whatever hardened values of their culture. So those are the dual threats. But the problem with it is, it seems to me, as just a layman with my own little thoughts, is the paradox of enforcing liberal values, which I mentioned last night on Headliners briefly to Leo. It's China can just go, these are our values. We love Xi. Go back to the factory, and is it they have no problems about it because that's what they are. They're authoritarian. Much harder for us to say, oh yeah, we're welcome here. It's an open liberal democracy. Oh, but we don't like that. But we need to be much tougher about that because English and British values don't mean just a free for all. It means free speech, civil liberties. It means certain things. But other groups who can't do that and who encroach upon that have to be dealt with very firmly. But that's where we've fallen down.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think a lot of these people that are particularly maybe British-born, white British people that are on the side of Hamas even, that they believe that anyone who's foreign and other must be positive. They find themselves on the outsides of society often. They're not part of a community often, or if they are, it's with others, so to speak. And so they see any others, so i.e. people that are foreign to our community, as positive, because they see anyone who criticises anyone who's different as being wrong, bigoted, racist, whatever it might be. And of course that's not true. How can you get anywhere? This is why we have Parliament. This is why there's two sides of Parliament. This is why we indulge in debate. This is why the most intelligent people in our country and in the Western world are able to stand up and have a debate on this subject. As soon as you take debate away, what have you got? The trouble is what people like the BBC are doing at the moment, and I hate to hark on about the BBC, is they're changing the rules of the game. You know, if you've got someone who's legally a terrorist group in UK terms, i.e. Hamas, and then you refuse to call them terrorists because it might upset somebody, you're changing the rules. You're saying we don't agree with the law. You're saying, but we might hurt people's feelings. And you end up with this problem now where history is going to look back at this moment for the BBC and say they should have at least stood up and said that was a terrorist attack, and then dealt with the other things, because there's lots of other things to consider. I hate to see what's happening to Palestinian families. Again, children, women, all these people that are being killed, quite frankly, aimlessly, in a retaliation. At no point is anyone going to stop. And I'll say this, and I really do mean this. I think that if the Israelis stop retaliating, ultimately they would be wiped out. But if the Palestinians stop retaliating, I think there'd be chance of peace in Israel and in the Middle East. And it needs some sort of Good Friday brokering of a deal. But I genuinely think that it's only the Palestinians that are saying they want to eradicate Israel and they want to eradicate the Jews. So I don't think Israelis on the whole are saying that. Now, again, you know, I'm not completely educated on this stuff, but just from what I've learned in my adult life, it would appear to me that the main aggressors when it comes to killing are Palestine. Now, of course, that I'm not being remiss here. Israel have far encroached on the West Bank. So they were given something in 1948 and they've kept encroaching and they've done it through force, and that is against international law. So they're going to have to stop that. But if they can rein that in and the Palestinians can stop slaughtering, we might have a chance of peace.